All right, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order and welcome you here. We have decided who's not going to be here. This time I'd ask you to check your telephones and go ahead and silence those if you can. I think most of us may have already done that. And please remember to activate your microphones. I heard some people say they couldn't hear us on TV, so if you're speaking, just mash that button to the right there to turn on the red button there. I think you've already had that works, doesn't it? Agenda sent to you, and if somebody will make a motion to approve that agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hands. Madam Clerk, that is unanimous. Also, you have had a copy of the minutes from our last meeting. The chair will entertain a motion if there is no corrections or additions or deletions from those minutes.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hands, please. That is unanimous, Madam Clerk. This time we're going to go into our business for today. And I want to again introduce Travis Isaacs, our tax administrator. He's going to do us a presentation on insights to the revaluation process. Travis?
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. I see a new face. I see Tim here. I haven't met Tim, so glad to have you here this morning. We're going to do a little presentation on real property reevaluation and the schedule values, and we've done a So we have covered an array of topics so far in this task force all the way through. And as we approach January 1, we're trying to tie everything together, kind of mold it all into one thing and to get a schedule of values and tie everything up. So what we kind of keep hammering in these task force meetings exactly what a reevaluation is. It's a reappraisal. We're actually resetting the values for January 1, 2027. And we're looking at land and structures and its true market value in the terms of money. Periodic revaluations help spread the fairness and equitable taxes over the county. We always look at what each neighborhood, each land area, each market area, what we try to spread that burden of the tax base out compared to the supply and demand across the county. And again, our reevaluation changes values. It doesn't actually change your tax bill. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It does not always change the tax amount that you're going to pay. It's always up to what the revenue the county needs to provide the services that they're going to provide. Okay. So typically, Chapter 105 of the Machinery Act is what governs the property taxes in North Carolina, and it sets on an octennial cycle, which means 8 years. Burke County is on the 4-year cycle, and back in 2025, DOR advised us that we need to do a reappraisal because our sales ratio dropped to a certain level or did not go above 115% on the threshold. A uniform appraisal standard is set. All property must be assessed as true market value, as I said before, and then we have to set the factors for our appraisal. We look at the location, size, use, replacement cost, income, and comparable sales. So there's three approaches to value that we're going to use: cost, income, and sales comparison.
As we move forward, I want us to place a special emphasis, I believe, on sales tax ratio assessments because there's not a lot of people understand that. And one of the reasons we went to a 4-year cycle is because the ratio says if you go 15% below or 15% above, and there's not a lot of the average citizens out there understand that the state is the one that decides what we do. I mean, as an arm of state government, that's what county commissioners are. They're just an arm of state government. So law dictates a lot of the things we do. And I think the paper in their last article kind of misled some people when they come out and said 22%. They gave not a whole great explanation of sales ratio. Now, people are spreading that little rumor as it goes. We're going up 22% on taxes. I think we need to take our time, really. I don't know how we're gonna do it yet, but make sure that people understand what the sales ratio assessment is. And that it requires it, that we do it if we come out of that 15%, which we did this year. We came out at 78.91%. So I hope we can figure out a way that we can do that a little better. And I would offer the floor to you folks if there's anything you want to say. Maybe am I going in the right direction with what I'm saying?
And what you're saying is the sales ratio is 22% lower than what our assessed value was in 2023. So we always have a set value that we must set at the reappraisal cycle. And when you switch to a 4-year cycle, it actually keeps the fluctuation of your tax bill from going up or down specifically. But sometimes in this market that we're in, it seems to appear that values are going up quicker than our sales ratio for that we set in 2023.
But I want the citizens to know the state is the one that's looking at that, and they advise us when we go out of that 15%, either above or below.
Exactly. Every year we have to do a sales ratio study. And once we drop below that 15, we could go above the 15 or below the 15, we must initiate a reappraisal within a 3-year span. So that was in 2025. We continue on the reappraisal cycle of 4 years. So that's where we're kind of just staying on that path to where we just stay on that 4-year cycle.
I think as a person in real estate and looking at values, and also as a taxpayer, the public, myself included, reassessment, taxes are going up. The reality is taxes can go up every year. You know, it depends on what the commissioners decide to make the tax rate. The reality is, you know, in a perfect world, maybe I'm just naive, that, okay, tax value goes up as long as it's revenue neutral to the county. Maybe that's just a naive thought on my part, but it doesn't ever seem like it's in line. Okay, tax values go up 30%. Well, then the tax rate ought to go down 30% so that you're remaining revenue neutral. Now, I understand costs go up, so the county's costs go up, but it seems like it's, at least what I hear people complain about, man, I just got my new tax bills and I know my taxes are going up 30% or whatever the number is. That's the message that's needs to be got out there. I think, you know, you want your tax value to go up, your property's worth more, but they don't want that to then translate into, well, golly, it went up, supply and demand, but now because it went up 30%, my taxes are 30% more. That's the concern.
That definitely is a concern. That's one of the hardest things to describe in this task force, is because we don't know what the tax rate would actually be, right? And we do have to, the county does have to look at inflation. Are there any funding that was taken away that we have to fund now that the state mandates us to do? So all those things play into the tax rate. And, you know, the county is trying to leverage other ways to generate revenue, which to take burden off of the tax rate and the tax base. So, yes, you say we're going to go up 30%, right? But that doesn't mean everybody goes up 30%. It goes into our market areas, our location, all those types of things. So we try to spread that value out to the right spots to where that burden is, the tax burden is shifted to where it needs to be shifted. Okay. And here's some of the factors that we look at right now. We're doing all of these things. Our appraisers are out in the field trying to look at the neighborhooding, the parcels. We try to group them into market areas, whether it's a lot size, types of houses, location, all those things, to come up with the correct values for those certain market areas. And I think we've done a pretty good job at recognizing the market areas and getting the correct locations to value and fairly and keep those values steady. We're going to look at land and building prices. We look at recent sales, and I'll go through that a little bit more as we go along. And then we do field and office reviews, which means we do go out in the field and check our measurements. We do have new permits all the time. We have new sales. We're going out and checking. If we don't, we also have Eagle View, which is pictures that we've taken to try to make sure our measurements are correct. And then we go out and make sure those pictures are correct. If some areas in the county are rural, we don't have great pictures, so we have to go out and check those. So we're always out in the field, we're in the office, we're trying to make sure our values are correct. And then at the end, when we do set the values, you will get a valuation notice and the opportunity to appeal that value if you don't agree with it. Again, we have the three approaches to value. We have the sales comparison. It has the biggest weight here when we try to look at our number of sales, especially for residential improved properties and vacant land. Hopefully we have enough sales. We try to verify those to similar properties, and then we adjust the differences in those properties, whether they have 2 bedrooms versus 3 bedrooms. One may have 2 baths, one may just have one. We try to make those adjustments. The cost approach is most reliable for new construction, and it's unique to special purposes or special properties where we don't have enough data, and we may have to look at the cost approach. And we also look at the depreciation for age and condition when we're doing that. And then we have the income approach. We try to do rent less expenses, which means we're trying to find out the rental income and indicate the capitalization rate to do that.
When you're doing an appraisal, for example, downtown property, do you look at all three approaches to value when you're, for example, if one building sells, which would indicate the sales approach, the next building beside it might not sell, but have a very low rental rate. Would you look at the income approach on that building and the sales approach on the other building? Or how do you determine?
We try to look at all three approaches.
All three approaches
We
for
consider
each.
them all to come up with the best, whichever one has the best data available to try to make that determination of value. So we're going to look at all three approaches. We can't just look at one. We must look at all three approaches. Rental properties, those are the best ones to use the income approach on. Sometimes it may be manufactured facilities. Cost approach may be something unique that we don't know, we don't have enough data. We'll talk about some of the pitfalls where we don't have enough data, what we have to do to fill the gaps in our data sets. But hopefully in our residential properties, our homes, we have enough sales. We can make good comparables to make those values correct. So each type of property kind of has a different, some people say that's the best approach, but we have to consider all three, whether it's income or cost. So qualified sales, that's kind of the backbone of what we're looking at. We're looking at arm's length transactions. We make sure that there's a willing buyer or willing seller, unrelated to the buyer and seller, and there's no pressure to buy, and they know everything, know about the properties. This does not excludes foreclosures, distress sales, estate sales, family transfers, and other non-market transactions. So we're trying to look at those. We try to qualify sales and disqualify sales to make sure they don't impact the sales ratio that we're looking at. And as you can see by the pie chart, usually about 70% of our sales try to drive what we're looking at. Then the other things are your cost and your income approaches, where we don't have any comparable sales. So when cost or income steps in, we have new construction, as I talked about before, and we just don't have comparable sales. We use the cost approach. Income producing, commercial, rental property, things like that, we'll use the income approach. And then we may have rural areas or low sales volume where we don't have enough qualified sales or scarce, and we have to blend all three of those approaches to try to come up with the correct value. I want to talk about vacant land a little bit and economies of scale. A lot of folks sometimes don't understand. More people want to buy a lot that they want to build a house on, right? That's more in demand than you would trying to buy a lot of acreage, because it's hard you want something that's ready to build. It's ready for you to build a home on. It's more affordable. It has a fixed cost, surveys, perk test, access. So if you buy 1 acre of land, in the example, the numbers are just kind of general numbers, but it might be $100 for an acre, right? But if you buy 5 acres and you're buying more in bulk, you're thinking I'm going to get a discount per unit because I'm buying larger tracts of land. So the larger tracts of land that you buy, the price per acre will go down. Okay. So these are not actual values, these are just numbers I threw up just to show, like if you go to Costco or Sam's Club, you're buying in bulk, right? You expect a discount per unit. Same way with land. So what do we do when we don't have enough data? Like I said, we don't have enough verified sales. It's limited local cost data. We may not have the same property. We may not have similar properties inside the county. We may have to look elsewhere to find that data and try to use comparables in the income, cost, or sales approaches to come up with the correct amount of value. So as we see, we use like CoStar, that's like a commercial real estate database. We try to use some other things, MLS data. We also use Department of Revenue has comparable county sales studies that they do. We try to look at and take those into account. And there's something called industry expense surveys, and it's a couple of real estate management companies and a building association that actually combines data so we can go out and look and see what operating expenses are or income benchmarks for a commercial property. So if we don't have enough data and we can't look across our region and find the same type of property in a similar setting, we may have to reach out and look at other different ways to fill those gaps of valuation.
Is our sales across the county consistent, or do we have some high sales in particular parts of the county right now?
Rita might be able to answer that question better. We have about 5,000 sales, I would say.
Yes, we have about 5,000 sales. The sales are mostly around, in the last 3 years, they've been mostly around Lake Rhodus. There's been a bulk of vacant land sales there. There have been sales across the county, but they tend to be in the same area more so. There's certain swaths of Burke County where we don't have very many sales, where the land tends to belong in families and gets transferred within families over the years. So we have a good number of sales. They're not necessarily well distributed.
Are the sales in Rhodus been saturated now? Is it pretty much full, that area?
The vacant land parcels in that one particular subdivision, yes, but there is other land that will be developed and sold, I'm sure.
So as Mr. Carswell was saying, we're talking about sales ratio, correct? So we have an appraised values divided by a verified sale price. And what we mean is we have a set value for our assessments in 2023. And now we're taking a qualified sale and dividing it by the verified sale price. And if we have 13 properties, we're trying to look for a median ratio, and we try to shoot for the middle of that ratio to see what our median is. And then we try to look at the coefficient of dispersion. So if the coefficient of dispersion is high, we may not have an accurate value on that piece of property. If it's lower, then we feel like the value is pretty good and we'll be pretty tight. Price related differential, it checks the bias between low and high value properties. Okay, so we're factoring in all these things to make sure that we're getting the value as close to market as we can in each area. And each area is different, just as you were describing. So what is the schedule of values? It's a standardized technical manual that we have to come up. We have building types and construction qualities, square footage and property improvements. We use depreciation factors for age and condition. And then we have land value schedules and neighborhood adjustments. So not every piece of property is the same. Every location is a little bit different. Something may be better or worse in each environment. It's consistent. It's defensible for appraisals countywide, and it just standardizes features are valued. So we can look at these schedule values and actually look and see what the square footage is for price per square foot, and also look at the land acreage and see what the values are. And so it's updated each general reappraisal, and citizens can come and review the schedule values before we adopt them. So they will be placed out when we send them to the board for approval. We'll submit those about 21 days prior to the hearing for those, and we'll do a market analysis for county appraisals. We'll analyze arm's length transactions. We'll draft the manual. We're currently trying to do that right now. We hope to have that ready in September and deliver to the board probably end of September, 1st of October. They'll have 21 days for their review. It'll also be in place in the tax office, so someone can come review it there if they would like. And then the board will try to adopt that at a public hearing in November, we hope, and then an appeal period. So the appeal period will come after the notices are sent out. We hope to send those out in January sometime. So the earlier we can send those out, the more we can work in formal appeals, which means we get our data correct. We can solve a lot of issues even before we get to the Board of E&R, which is equalization review.
Have we announced about the online appraisals yet?
Online appeals?
Yeah, appeals, I'm sorry.
No, we haven't actually announced that yet. We're actually getting ready to test that from what I understand to make sure, because this will be the first time we've done it. So we're going to test it pretty thoroughly, but that will be an excellent thing that we're going to talk about in the next meeting. That will show, hey, we have online appeals and make it easier for the taxpayers. It'll actually speed up our process as well, where we can take the data in, get it to the right appraiser, and have them go out and look at the property. So the object is to try for us to go out and see every appeal to make sure that we have the value accurate even before it goes to the Board of E&R, because this is mass appraisal. We don't actually go and look at each piece of property. So that's what the appeal process is for, to make sure that we have our data correct. And so preparing for the revaluation, so the task force at work, and this is what we have the task force for, is to have these questions and bring up these comments and make sure that everyone's aware that we're trying to do the most fair and equitable thing across the board, that our processes are correct, our methodology is correct, and everyone understands it. There's a lot of knowledge in this room, a lot of experience in real estate, development, insurance-wise, home builders. So we have a lot of great people in the room to help us create a transparency across the county. And we'll also we're going to go out and speak as we move forward. Sometime December, January, we'll go out and speak in the community to make sure that everyone's aware of the appeal process, any tax relief exemptions, things like that, to make sure that everyone is on the same page as best we can. And then we'll adopt the schedule of values for 2027, and just for analysis, public review, and adoption from the board again. So we like to reiterate a lot of things that the process, how we started, how we began, and all the things in the middle. So any questions, John?
How have we made sure that people understand that there's ways that they can apply for the exemptions? The two main exemptions, really.
The two main exemptions, the elderly and the disabled, pretty much has been online, but we're going to do a little more transparency, a little more public information. We're probably going to go to the senior centers, and I think there's on Veterans Day, there's going to be something where one of the Navy SEAL or somebody's going to come and speak. I think we're going to go down there and set up a table and make sure our veterans are aware of the exemption as well. That's one thing. We're going to be updating our website. We're working on that right now to make sure that it has better information on it for our citizens. So there's a lot of things that we can do to improve the process and make it easier for folks to understand the timing of everything and get their exemptions in, requests in. So
Can I have a copy of those? Can you shoot me that as an email? The entire presentation
yes, sir.
that you've done?
Yes, sir.
Because I want to go over it again. So I've made notes really quickly, but my dictation is not great. So
Understand.
I'd like to be able, most of that stuff flows really great. I think it's, I'm forward thinking of doing presentations, and a lot of that information is what I want to hit when I'm talking to folks.
Right.
So yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great.
Sure.
I can send it out after the meeting. Yeah, I have a copy.
Yeah.
Well, there's two parts. I mean, so people just, you have a reevaluation. Oh, sorry. You have a reevaluation. So your property was, I can think of, I had two, ladies, husbands passed away, and they're on fixed income, and they just got their tax bills, and I don't know that it really was much different this year versus last year, but didn't ask that. But anyway, if you have a reevaluation and it went from 100,000 to 130, I know that's a small number, but that's only, I mean, I don't know that I necessarily need to appeal if my properties went up in value, it's went up in value. Really what hits home is then when the tax rate doesn't adjust accordingly down so that, what I paid last year is kind of pretty close to what I'm gonna be paying this year. That's really when, maybe I'm missing it. I would think, how can I necessarily appeal the value until I know what the rate is?
Well, it is difficult. It's certainly difficult. The main thing is to make sure that we have our data correct. So if you feel that our data is incorrect, and then we can make adjustments to that for sure. It is difficult to understand that when you're appealing, you do not know what the actual tax bill is.
Right.
However, I will say, I'm not been here for about 2 months now, almost 2.5. I can tell that Burke County has worked very hard to keep the tax rate at a consistent level, just to meet what the revenues that they need to provide the services in a conservative manner. Now, I'm not saying we don't know what all the costs will be coming to the next budget cycle for sure, but I feel like our budget team, county manager, board members, everybody's doing their best to take the burden off of the tax base, which means keeping your bill at a steady rate, not where there's big jumps and increases.
I am, I still just shake my head when I think about it. This month is 40 years I've been in real estate. 40 years. And so when people complain, I know I'm old. And when I got in real estate, rates were 12.5%. And people complain today. It just blows my mind. I mean, and I wish we were back at 3%. I don't see us ever going back there. That was a fluke. Thankful for it. But rates 6.5%, and that's not an unreasonable. But it don't matter if it's, people are going to complain. If it's 5, I wish it was 4. If it's 4, I wish it was 3. Anyway, the rate is the rate. I understand cost or cost. You just have to deal with it.
I just think the best thing we could do is look at, if someone appeals, we listen to it, we take the time to work through it and make sure that we have the value as accurate as possible. That's really what the tax office is charged to do, is make sure the value is correct. And then we have to trust that everybody's looking at the cost, and I believe that's what they're doing to the county and the revenues and the services they're providing. So, and I believe they've been pretty consistent with that so far. So I don't see where, um, you know, we're kind of in a unique economy, where values continue to somewhat increase, the supply and demand. People are moving to this type of area, and and when the supply goes down and the demand's high, the price goes up. And Burke County is a growing county. It's a good county. I'm glad to be here, and I'm sure everybody that lives here is proud of this county. So I don't think that we can always assume the thing you're trying to say, Mr. Newton, is that even though your value goes up, there's still a tax rate, right? So we have to correlate those things. It's hard to, if your value goes way up, we can understand where you might have questions about that. We'll try to answer them as best we can, and we try to defend our values with the data that we have. And we'll definitely come look at your property and listen to your appeal.
I think one of the biggest problems you have, especially in commercial real estate, is determining the cap rate of income properties. Because different properties dictate a different cap rate. For example, a national tenant has a lower cap rate than a local tenant.
Yes.
The cap rate. So I think one of the problems you have, our biggest problems you have, is determining the value of a piece of commercial real estate based on its income approach. And I know I don't envy you trying to decide what cap rate you're going to use.
Exactly, because you may not get the true rent disclosure, anything like that. You may not have privy to the lease, certain things like that. So, and NOMREIT and the staff have really tried to use correct, like I was talking about when the data is thin on that slide. It talks about the kind of the avenues we can research and the data we can look at to try and compare it to Burke County. Right, so we try to get the right cap rates, right cost approach, right depreciation schedules. Sales are sales, right? And so we can compare those as best we can, the qualified ones, and come up with the right values. So it's a detailed process, and it takes time. And our staff has put in a great amount of time, and still are, because, you know, we have 2027 sales too. And as we work closer, we try to dictate what that value is going to be on January 1, 2027. So even though we had sales in 23, we're still waiting the values of in the sales of 2026 to get our 2027 value.
That's, I agree with Tim 100% that there's the two questions. I mean, you get your schedule of valuations, and I think we've done everything we can do to make sure that those are in line. I was actually kind of surprised when the state come out and said that we were at 78.91. I actually thought it was going to be more than what it was. And I kind of did a calculation on my little property. I live in the poor section of the county, but my property, you know, it's like $88,000. And if I divided that out by 78.91, it makes my valuation somewhere in the neighborhood of $112,000. You know, then it's dependent upon what the county commissioner sets the rate at. I got to remember, I got my valuation, then it's up to the commissioners, you know, to set that rate. And my experience in government is that in practice, county governments rarely adopt a revenue neutral because of the fact that there is inflation and employee wages and public service and all those things that the state mandates that you provide for the county, not the peripheral things that the county tries to do. They try to put money into the schools. So rarely do they adopt that revenue neutral. But in history in Burke County, we've kept that as close to revenue neutral as could be. There are some counties that have been able to go revenue neutral after they've done their revaluations. But I think our commissioners will have not a hard task, but they'll have that task of deciding whether they want to go to revenue neutral or whether they want to go up, and so that to be able to pay the bills. But I'm very proud of what y'all have done as far as the schedule of values. There's a lot of information out there to work with. Brian knows better than anybody, I think, when he's out there buying materials to build a house, what he's had to go through. How do you explain that to somebody? I told you I was going to build it for 10,000. Now it's going to cost 10,500 because materials, you never know from Monday till Friday what they're going to be. Is that correct, Brian?
Biggest thing I'll say is.
Turn the little button on there for me.
Biggest thing I'll say, for example, is with these barn dominiums. You know, that's
Barn-dominiums?
been all the rage for the last 5 years. And, you know, we got people out here on TikTok and social media saying, oh, you can build this 4,000 square foot barn dominium for $200,000. And, you know, then they come in your office and you sit down and you get honest with them. And you explain, you know, you still got 4,000 square feet here. You still got electric service. You still got concrete. You still, you know, but, and then they want to argue with you. I've actually had the opportunity last year. I had a client that told me that I was too expensive and he was going to be his own contractor. And about halfway through the framing process, he hired me to come in and finish it. But there's a lot of that going on. I mean, prices are going up so fast. I hate to even speculate. If someone calls me, if I'm talking to someone about their house and they say, well, how much of the rent is going to be? Ballpark. I hate to even throw a number on the table because it's changed so frequently for the last couple of years.
Hey, to that point, or kind of going along that point, one thing, and I've always questioned, I know there's three valuation approaches. The cost approach has always been kind of just a mystery to me because, and Brian's got way more experience than me at this. I've never had anybody call me. Do you ever have anybody call you and say, so how much did you build that house for? That's really, you know, that's not an MLS thing where you put it out there. And if John Brown comes to you and says, hey, Brian, I want you to build me this house and, you know, I just sold up north and I'm going to be paying cash. It's not really published anywhere. They bought the lot for say $50,000 and Brian charged them $350 to build the house. How do you come up with a cost? How do you know what the cost is?
Well, we try to use sales because when you use a sales comparison, it actually accounts for the depreciation. Hopefully.
Sales of a spec house.
A spec house might be a little bit different for sure.
Because that then is something that's recorded, it's in MLS. But if you're doing a custom home, again, nobody calls, say, hey, how much was that house you built over on, you know, 102 AB Street or whatever it is?
I've never had that happen as far as just a customer calling out of the blue and wanting to know what I charged to build a house previously.
Yeah.
I did run into a situation several years back over at Rocky Creek in Salem where I had built a house for some folks, and I went up around the corner and literally built virtually the exact same home with a few modifications for another customer. And it was in such a short window of time, my cost had went up $28,000 on virtually the same house in a period of like 6 months. And the appraiser calls me up, Eric Greer calls me up and basically says, I don't know how I'm gonna make this thing comp for 28,000 more dollars because you just did the same house down the street. He knew that information because he appraised it for the lender.
Right.
But yeah, otherwise, no, I haven't had that.
Well, and so that's a little different in that that's an appraiser for a lender, or if it's a cash buyer. But for the county to use a cost approach, does the county, as a matter of its three, I guess, methods, obviously sales comparison is going to be the most common and the most, I guess, predictable because you've got records there. But does the county ever call a builder, a Brian or a Cottonwood or anybody, hey, I know you're building this monster at the lake. What's your cost on that? What are you selling that house for?
Well, if we get lucky and the contractor will talk to us, we will ask those
Yeah.
questions for sure.
I've been
But-
asked that
but
by
when it
field
comes-
appraiser
But when it comes to the,
Really?
through the tax. I've been asked that
Okay.
question by field appraiser
Yeah.
at the tax office.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, when they come out, the house is not even finished yet. And they're
Yeah.
out walking around and they're asking, what's this gonna cost when you get done? I have been asked that question before.
From the insurance side, I have to know how much you built it for. So it doesn't matter to me, it's on the lake or it's in the middle of Valdez, it's the cost of construction, and I have to insure it to 100% of the replacement cost at the time I write it. So I ask that question all the time. It's just the natural course of what's in it, so I know how to insure it. I can even drill that down to a guy built a street rod, and he's got $170,000 in it. I got to insure it for 170 because that's what he has in it. Now, just like what you said, in 6 months the paint's going to go up, material's going to go up, so that value is going to increase probably by 15-20%.
Yep.
But it's the thing. So, but the house on the lake you built for $350, you could probably get 7 or better for it, but you're not going to get that in Valdez.
Mhm.
So the cost approach for me is that, and it's the location. You got to go back to where it is. So if you're building at Connie Springs, it might not be $750, even it's on the new lake roadies, because location. So
yeah. And for us, the cost approach is more geared towards unique properties where we don't have anything like it, and we need to know the cost and the best we can so we can come up with a depreciation. That's one thing. When it comes to home sales and things like that, we have similar type properties we can compare it to. So that's
sitting on the board, the ERR board for the last 10 or so years, the biggest problem we ever have in valuation is the legacy properties that have been passed from one generation to the next. And the current owner has no idea of the value, truthfully, of what that property is worth because they inherited it. So those are the folks that have the most difficult time with the rate adjustment. But most of the concern we have, and Narita will say this, they're more concerned with the tax rate, not the valuation. They come in with that conversation as I can't pay the taxes on this because the valuation has gone up so high, not attacking it from the other angle. And we see a lot of people who, and I'll blow the horn for the tax office. The data is very, very accurate. So in the beginning, we used to see, well, that parcel was, maybe a third or even a half acre bigger than it was, or smaller than it was, or we had 1,215 square feet, which we actually had 1,300. And that data's been corrected over the years. So when we see them from the ENR side, that was our first topic. Well, how big is it? Show us the description. Have you built anything on it? Have you removed something? But those questions have become fewer and fewer heard and discussed because the data has been corrected a year after year after year. So for us, it's when we get those, when they come to the ENR board, it's the value, the tax rate. And that's their concern.
Well, Johnny, you mentioned earlier about the article in the paper, about the 22% across the board increase. I don't know if any of you guys saw that on Facebook and the comments that went along with it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But there's 100 people on there saying, "Oh, I can't afford pay my bill." Yeah, because they don't understand.
They
There's
don't
two
understand.
different variables here.
I told the chairman I had an impromptu conversation last night at Vacation Bible School because they knew I was on the ENR board and they came up, "What's this 22%?" I said, "It's not 22%. That's the paper. It's going to be different for everybody."
Yeah, the
But
goal-
yeah, so 10 minutes, I'm sitting there discussing the Vacation Bible School about what the tax was going to be.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Mr. Carswell was saying before. We're required to do this by the state when it drops to a certain level. And whether it's 22%, it might be just that number. It's not all the way across the county. Right, so those ratios, are spread out. Right, so.
I just want to give a shout out to our appraisers and our staff. They have the hard job of having to go out to properties where people don't necessarily appreciate the tax office. It's a hard job. I think they do it very, very well. So if you guys see any of our appraisers or any of our tax staff out, it'd be great if you encourage them.
And add to that, when they get to the ENR side, when the appraisers have been out there, they've got photographs on the screen. They have done a very detailed review of the property in question. So we have a lot of information once they get to us. And they also get it to you, but once it gets to us, we get to see it and discuss it. So they're doing a really good job. They need to be patted on the back.
Yes, they're there because they're required to be there.
Yeah.
Not because they just decide to drive up and pick on you. If there's a permit or something like that, they need to come review the property, and they are doing a great job. We can't thank them enough.
All right, any other questions for Travis? If not, I need a motion to accept Travis's report.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Madam, all in favor, raise your right hands. Madam Clerk, that is unanimous. Thank you so very much, Travis. Great overview. I want to open the floor up to the members of the committee. I'd like to start out, if you don't mind. I have developed a one-page outreach plan that we've gone with the county manager and Travis. I've sat down with them and talked about. This is not the final plan that we need to go for our outreach and our reevaluation presentation out in the county. So I want to let you know as soon as we finalize that, at some point in time, we're going to have just a few people that will be at the presentations, making the presentation itself, and mainly that's going to be Travis. Everyone is invited when we find places that we want to go to. Everybody is invited to be there, but I do think we need to narrow that down as to who speaks, and pretty much I think Travis needs to, but we need to be there for moral support and answer questions if any citizen has a question of us. So, and I do want to get with the paper, with your permission. I want to go back to the paper and ask them to sit down with either me or sit down with me and Travis and maybe let them go back in and say a little bit more so people they're not thinking that it's going to go up 22%. That when I read it, I was kind of taken aback myself. It was a great presentation, but it just could have gone a little deeper in their wording. And I know they're again trying to sell the papers, but we need to. That's the reason this committee was put together. And like Travis said, this is unique. Nobody else has ever done it like this. So we want to make sure that we're getting the information out as clearly as we possibly can. So I agree with Brian. I did go to Facebook, which I don't do all the time, but I wish I hadn't. There was some really nasty comments on there. So
The way that article was written to me, it flat out said, if your tax bill is currently $1,000 next year, it's going to be $1,220.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how it was implied.
And I think everybody else interpreted that way also. Okay.
And I think as we move forward, the plan is to talk more about the rate. as we move forward but as we get closer to when the values actually go out, and we'll talk more about rate with the board. Cause really, we don't know what the rate's gonna be, so it's hard to bring that up. We can talk about value and how the valuation process, what we're in control of in our office, so.
And like we said, the rate is entirely up to the county commissioners. If they want to go revenue neutral, they can. If they want to go below, they can. If they want to go above, they can vote to do that and take the consequences from there. But that's where we're standing right now. And I really appreciate what we have done here. So I've had my say, Jerry. Anything? Kevin? Tim? Unusual, Tim. Brian, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, if not, I don't think we have, Namrita, anything? Okay. I don't think we have anything else to come, before us today, so our next meeting is scheduled for September the 22nd at 9 a.m. We've moved that from September 1st, so please put that on your calendars for September the 22nd. If there's nothing else, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.